Howdy folks, Anna, Megan, Max, pick your poison, here with another video. We're still in lockdown here in Louisiana. Since I put my video up in the way too early hours of Monday morning, Louisiana has jumped nearly 500 cases to 1,388 confirmed cases of COVID-19. There's still only 5 confirmed for the parish that I'm in, county for those of you who live in any other state. Rumor has it Louisiana has the fastest growth rate of cases in the world. I don't know how true that is, but it wouldn't surprise me. Even when we suck, we don't do it in halves. I mean, we're last in everything, like healthcare and education. We had to be first in something eventually, right? But Louisiana's inability to respond to a pandemic is not the point of this video, though. We talking about books again. Also, enjoy my editing some Overwatch highlight videos in the background. I didn't feel like playing anything for this video. For the last 2 years, I've been attempting to accomplish the goal of reading 2 books every month for a year. I brought this up in a previous video talking about all the books I'd read in 2019 up until that point. I feel like if I had kept up with these videos, I would have had some way to hold myself accountable. I rate my performance in 2019 a solid C because I did read 29 books, or if you consider that I read 3 of those books 2 or 3 times over, so I hit my goal in overall numbers. But I did stop reading in June. There's 1,000 different reasons and excuses. Sometimes I'm great at multitasking, and other times I'm just super bad at it. I'm just gonna move on with my life. In 2020, I intend to keep this goal again of reading a minimum of 2 books a month. It sounds like rookie numbers when you watch other booktubers and you see them talking about like the 7 to 12 books they've read in a month. I'm not trying to set myself up for failure though. Why would I increase my goal when I can't reach the smaller one I've been setting for myself? I have that habit, setting goals that I can't reach and then hating myself when I fail, and I'm deciding this year to cut myself some slack. Now there are some goals within that goal. I do pay for Kindle Unlimited, and I want to make sure I'm getting my money's worth on that. Thus, one of the books I read has to be a book from the Kindle Unlimited library. The second book I choose for the month needs to be from the massive, backlog I've built up over the years. I spent money on these books, I should actually read them at some point. And after that, I'm free to read whatever the hell I want. I do want to try to branch out of my science fiction and fantasy comfort zones, but let's walk before we run. Considering it's almost the end of March, we've got some catching up to do. Couple disclaimers before we get started though. For those of you who didn't watch the last video or don't want to, I rate my books 1 to 5 stars. No half stars or decimal points here, I think that's ridiculous. 1 star means I thoroughly did not enjoy this book. I'm surprised I even finished it, and I would not recommend anyone read it unless, that's their kink or whatever. 2 stars means it was a solid try, but there were just not enough good things in this book to balance out what I didn't like about it. 3 stars is my indifferent rating. The book wasn't great, but it wasn't too bad. Essentially, it just didn't leave much of an impression on me. 4 stars means we're getting into territory where I actually enjoyed the book. This rating, it means it was an overall fun read. There were just some issues I couldn't get over. And 5 stars, as you can guess, means that I loved the book. I would scream its praises from the top of a mountain where I physically fit enough to climb one. It doesn't necessarily mean it was flawless, but I enjoyed it enough not to give a shit. And keep in mind, when I talk about not liking a book, I'm not always trying to say that it's a bad book, unless I do specifically state as much. Most of the time it just means that a book wasn't for me. Every book out there is someone's favorite and someone's least favorite, and I try to remember that when I'm rating these things. Also, spoiler warning, and everything I talk about is linked below, probably Amazon links because I'm lazy. I don't get money if you buy them. This girl just doing this for her own sanity. Is that all the disclaimers? Yeah, okay. Enough stalling. Let's get into it. I met my minimum goal in January, and I'm gonna blame my stubborn pride for the reasons I didn't read more. You see, I didn't exactly pick winners to start the year off, but I can't leave a book unfinished. It just bothers me. So the first book I read was Blood Orchid by Tyesha J. Franklin. It's hard to describe what this book is about because the synopsis really doesn't help. The book follows a woman named Onyx, who is an immortal vampire-like creature. They drink soul energy instead of blood, I think, and they don't have all the vampire weaknesses, like sunlight, garlic, crosses, and what have you. She spent countless centuries on the run from some guy, some dude who's the same thing she is. He's got some odd obsession with her. Everything sort of comes to a head in this book because it, wouldn't have much of a plot if it didn't. I ended up picking this book because I wanted to support a first-time author, and I sort of know the person. I doubt they would consider us friends, but we are personally acquainted with one another. We used to work for the same people. Now, I applaud the courage it takes to publish a book, especially to self-publish, because Maker knows I haven't found it yet, and it's blessedly short, coming in at under 100 pages. But that's all the good things I have to say about it. I rated it 1 star. This author needs to figure out what to show in a book and what not to. For example, at some point in the book, Onyx goes to the bar she works at. We get a couple paragraphs about a painting that's hanging up in the bar, talking about its history and how it's become so iconic to the community that people get it tattooed on their body. With as much attention as was paid to this painting, one might think it's important later. Spoiler alert, it's not. And there are also a couple times where the characters perform magic, but we don't get to see any real description of what it is or what's happening. A couple fight scenes are the same way in the book, too. It's clear as well that the author didn't have anyone else read through this before they put it up, or at least not someone willing to point out obvious flaws. There are quite a few times where words are used incorrectly, or the misspelling is still an actual word, so a spell check wouldn't pick it up. Hung instead of hanged, then instead of than. There's an instance where the word memoirs is used as if it means something else, and that's a common mistake in this book, words being used as if the author thought they meant something else. There's also a couple times in the book where it becomes unclear who is talking and tenses change in the middle of paragraphs sometimes. So overall, just not the best writing, and the use of flashbacks made the story impossible to follow. Pretty sure the story was over 50% flashbacks, and I feel like the epilogue made most of those flashbacks pointless. Maybe. I'm still a little confused. It seemed like right when I was getting a handle on the plot, a flashback would come in and now nothing makes sense. I shouldn't walk away from the end of a book with less clarity than I started with. I don't regret buying the book because I don't regret supporting a first-time author and the guts it takes to expose your creation to the cruel whims of the internet. I just hope she learns a lot before she publishes the next one, or at the very least has a couple people read through it for grammar and spelling mistakes before releasing it into the wild, because our next book demonstrates that the quality, or lack thereof, of a story doesn't necessarily mean that people don't like it. Oh boy, the second book I read in January 2020 was The End of the Last Great Kingdom by Victor Rose. This book definitely earned its 1-star rating, and I only gave it that much because it exists and you can't rate a book 0 stars on Goodreads. To give you a hint as to how much I hated this book, I keep a journal specifically for tracking books that I want to read, have read, and notes on the books that I finished. Most books, even the ones I don't like because I have the most thoughts on those usually, get around 3 to 5 pages of notes. This one got almost 30. It's bad enough to deserve its own video, and it will definitely be getting one later this week. It's not like I don't have a lot of free time on my hands right now. As a teaser though, this book is gross. It's just gross. The author was trying to go a little too hard into the dark part of dark fantasy, and it just ended up being a bad book. The things Victor Rose decided to describe versus the things that were left to our imagination were baffling at times. It felt like he was trying to draw from 8 different books at once and ended up with something that was just not digestible. Flat characters, chaotic plot, overuse of exposition. This is just a taste of the many issues I had with this book. Keep an eye out for that video going up sometime in the next few days. But thankfully, February started off a lot better. I started the month with the Evermore Chronicles by Emily R. King. This trilogy consists of Before the Broken Star, Into the Hourglass, and Ever After Song. Some of you may remember from my first video like this that I read a couple books by this author last year. The 100th Queen and The Fire Queen, the first 2 books in her 100th Queen series. I didn't like those, so I was a bit worried going into this series. But I was worried for nothing. I loved these books. Like the Paper Magician series, I read all 3 of these in a 48-hour period. This book series follows a girl named Everly as she seeks to avenge her family by killing the man who killed them and left her for dead. She only survived because her uncle gave her a clockwork heart, and as she travels farther and farther from home on her quest for revenge, she realizes that nothing is as it seems. This was a fantastic book that had a habit of showing you how perspective can really change the way you see something. For instance, there's a fairy tale that comes up a lot in the first book, and as the series progresses, you learn that the fairy tale is true in so many aspects, but not necessarily in the way you first assumed. It was also great to see how the main character Everly changed and grew as she experienced more and more in the book. We start with someone whose sole purpose in life is to find and kill a certain person. Then, as her friend circle grows and her view of the world changes, she starts to wonder if she can be that kind of monster, so to speak. And finally, the clockwork heart worked so well in the story to give this underlying current of urgency to almost everything the characters did. If you have Kindle Unlimited, I highly recommend these books. I mean, even if you don't, the ebooks are only about $5 each if you don't catch them on sale. I am so happy I gave this author a second chance because the books were definitely more my style. I think it comes down to the fact that Everly is the kind of strong female protagonist I like to see in books. She's so much different from the clueless, helpless girl from the 100th Queen series. I rated Before the Broken Star and Into the Hourglass 5 stars, but Ever After Song only got 4 stars. I still thoroughly enjoyed it, but by that point, I had gotten a little tired of the main villain. He was constantly being one step ahead of our main characters, and it got to the point where his miraculous escapes weren't shocking anymore, they were just irritating. And the ending, while I thought fit the story, might leave some people a bit cranky, but it's still 100% worth it. I also managed to squeeze 3 other books into February after those. It was a busy month for me, for reading. Anyways, my boss lent me The Innocent Mage by Karen Miller. This is the first book in the Kingmaker Kingbreaker duology? I think there's only 2, and then there are 2 spin-off books that are technically included in the series. Not important. My manager thought this would be a nice change of pace versus the end of The Last Great Kingdom, and it was, sort of. The Innocent Mage is about a man named Asher. He moves from his fishing village to the big city to find a better paying job. His plan is to work for a year and then take all of that money home so he can buy his dad a fishing boat and they can both live happily ever after, I guess. And as luck would have it, he saves the prince of the prince's prized horse on his first day into town and gets himself a pretty good paying job. What Asher doesn't realize is he's walked into the center of a prophecy that warns basically of the end of the world and says he's going to be the one to stop it. We learn the prophecy through secondary characters. Most of the book is told from Asher's perspective, but every now and again, though, we get a chapter sprinkled in from his friend Daphne, who is chosen by some super secret, very illegal organization to watch over him until the prophecy arrives. We also get chapters from Prince Gar's perspective, which really only becomes important at the end of the book. In fact, this book only gets interesting at the end of it. I ultimately gave The Innocent Mage a 3-star rating because it was just so slow to get to the point, and by the time it got there, I didn't care. We spend the first 500-ish pages following Asher around, while only getting hints at this larger political struggle. You just get chapters from the secondary characters every now and again, reminding you of the overall impending catastrophe plot. Everything that happens to set up the fulfillment of the prophecy is at the end of the book, and it isn't even from Asher's perspective. It all follows Prince Gar and a couple other people, and Asher's not even involved. It was just frustrating. I might get around to reading the sequel one day. This might be an Avengers Infinity War situation. I didn't actually like Infinity War until after I had watched Endgame and I had the whole story, so this is probably the same thing. The 5th book I finished in February was another indifferent read. I actually started this one while I was waiting for my tire to be repaired, and I'd forgotten the book that I had intended to start at home. This was another Kindle Unlimited read. It's The Vine Witch by Luanne G. Smith. Most of the Kindle Unlimited books clock in around 300 to 400 pages, so if they're not too bad, you can finish them fairly quickly. The Vine Witch is set in turn-of-the-century France, like automobiles are just starting to be a thing. Our main character, Elena, is one of these vine witches. These are witches employed by vineyards who use magic to care for plants and enhance the wine that they make, all that stuff. We join her just as she's coming out of a curse that left her a toad for 7 years, because that sounds like a fun time. When she returns to the vineyard she grew up in, things definitely aren't the way she left them. The vineyard is absolutely failing in her absence. The woman she calls grandmother, who owned the vineyard and raised her to be a skilled vine witch, well, she sold it to a guy who doesn't even believe in magic. Jean-Paul thinks it's all silly superstition and nonsense, that science is the only way to save the harvest. So she has to either convince Jean-Paul magic is real or use her magic behind his back to fix whatever hexes cover the vineyard, all while plotting her deadly revenge against the man she believes cursed her. This book started as like a little magic romp and then turned into a murder mystery partway through, and that was a little weird. I rated this book 3 stars. It was a good read, but the plot didn't seem like it was focused in the right spot for me. The first half of the book is Elena trying to decurse the vineyard while trying to figure out how she's going to murder the dude she thinks cursed her. Then, just as we get hints of a darker magic ritual, missing and dead pets with their organs removed, Elena gets framed for the dark magic stuff and a murder. So, cherry on top of the cupcake. I definitely wish the fugitive from the law murder mystery plot had been given more pages, because that was far more interesting than the first part of the book. And I know this book is more of a fantasy romance than it is a murder mystery, so the main villain being so obvious didn't bother me that much. What did bother me, though, was Elena learning in the last 3 chapters of the book that everything she thought she knew about her life was basically a lie, and we don't get to see her digest this fact. We just get 2 short chapters, one from Jean-Paul's point of view and the other from Elena's, giving us a quick rundown of the consequences of everything that happened and the vineyard's making good wine again. So, yay. This is also another in a long line of books where the romance feels either sudden or cheap to me. I can't decide which. Elena and Jean-Paul obviously fall in love at some point, but it doesn't feel like we saw enough interactions between them that hinted at that sort of thing. They go from he thinks that she's really weird and she doesn't like him because he doesn't believe in magic, and then every now and again you get like a thought from either one of them that thinks, hey, maybe that other person's okay, and then suddenly they're willing to die for each other. It just seemed like because the romance was a foregone conclusion, the author didn't put as much effort into showing the growth of the relationship as I would have liked, but that's really just my preference. Other people might not be as bothered by it as me. There is a sequel coming out in June called The Glamourist. That's going to focus heavily on a character we met in this book. From the synopsis, it looks like it will also show Elena coming to terms with everything she learned at the end of The Vine Witch, so fingers crossed. If it shows up on Kindle Unlimited and I've got some free space in June, I might pick it up, but it's not at the top of my TBR. Thankfully, we ended February on a really good note. The last book I read last month was Aurora Rising by Amie, Kaufman, and Kristoff. This is the first co-author book that I've ever read, also a young adult science fiction novel. I've already spoken at length about the difference between young adult and adult categories, so we're not going to go there in this video. But if you want me to elaborate more, leave a comment down below and I'll get around to making it. It's not like I don't have all of the free time in the world right now. I gave this book 5 stars, which surprised me because I haven't liked a straight-up science fiction novel in a long time. It's about young men and women of different races, or species, I guess, since some of them are aliens. They're all the misfits of their academy. Think of the academy as if the UN could train forces and then deploy them as a neutral peacekeeping force to various conflicts. These guys are supposed to be the best of the best, and after their recent graduation, they end up in a squad under the Academy Golden Boy. Their first mission gets a little complicated by a stowaway, though, a young girl found in cryosleep on a colony ship thought to have been lost for over 200 years. Oh, and she's got psychic powers. Our group of ragtag heroes find themselves caught up in a conspiracy that stretches across the galaxy and involves very high levels of different governments. It gave me a lot of Mass Effect feels. It really did, and that's not a bad thing. This was a thrilling story. It's all written in first person, and each chapter is from the point of view of a different character, and each of their voices is unique enough that I never got confused as to who we were following and when. I did have some favorite characters. Finn was fantastic. It's very easy to take a character like him and make them the comic relief, but I felt like he was as important to the story as anyone else. And all the chapters from Cal's perspective were so well written. He's got a very poetic, elegant way of thinking and speaking that I just, was nice to read. There's also hints of greater world building that I'm excited to see intersect with the path that our characters are on. There's also a moment where we get a chapter from the perspective of a character that's becoming part of a hive mind. That was one of the most interesting interpretations I've ever read of that kind of thing. Really, this book was fantastically done. The sequel comes out in summer, I believe, and will probably land very close to the top of my TBR when it drops. And that's all I read in January and February. At the beginning of March, I did pick my 1 physical book and 1 Kindle Unlimited book to read. Technically, I picked 3 Kindle Unlimited books, but that's besides the point. The physical book I plan to read, but I probably won't finish before the end of this month, is A Crash of Fate by Zoraida Cordova. God, I hope I pronounced that right. This is a Star Wars book released right around the time Galaxy's Edge opened in the Disney parks, the big Star Wars area. I think it takes place on the same planet. I don't know, it's got smugglers and farmers, a job's gone wrong, and it seems pretty interesting. The reason why I might not get to finish it is because I've lost it. It's somewhere in my car or in my room, and I'm just too lazy to try and find it. The Kindle Unlimited books that I picked this month is the Numina trilogy by Charlie and Holmberg. The Paper Magician series quickly earned this author a spot in my top 5, and everything I've read from her I've thoroughly enjoyed. This trilogy consists of Smoke and Summons, Myths and Mortals, and Siege and Sacrifice. I did read the first 2 last year. Technically, I listened to them on my drive from Seattle to Louisiana, and I loved them. But I had stopped reading by the time the 3rd one came out, so I'm gonna reread the first 2 and try to squeeze the 3rd one in, in the next 7 days. Obviously, I'm running out of time to read these books because there's barely a week left in March by the time I'm recording this, but it's been a really stressful month, guys. And it's not like I have any other excuses to procrastinate with. And that's everything I've got to say for this video. If you've read or plan to read one of the books I mentioned, leave a comment down below what you thought of it. I'm always interested in hearing other people's opinions on books that I've read, especially how they might interpret something differently than me. Also, I encourage you to let me know if you have a suggestion for a book I might enjoy, or hate if you want to watch me suffer. And insert obligatory beg for tapping of the like button, and asking you to subscribe if you want more videos at random intervals. And I'll see you next time, whenever that might be again.